reboot, boys, is when Hollywood wants to make a lot of money without the hassle of creating a new movie. So they take an old movie and change just enough to make you pay for the same shit all over again.
Those greedy fucking animals.
Hello, and welcome to the Warp Shelf. I'm Frank Duran.
I'm Deshaun Vasquez.
And today we're talking about something that maybe shouldn't exist. Something that inherently is an experiment. Mm-hmm. We're not talking about reboots today. We're talking about remakes. And we're talking about, and the thing about remakes is that inherently they are an experiment. Yeah. You are taking the same thing and remaking it. You are doing it again. And that's a special type of thing that is very specific to film. Because when you do a play again, it's not a remake of a play. It's just another stage of a play. You know, like
just another showing,
it's like when you redo a song, it's a cover or a remix. It's like it's very specific to this genre, and it's an interesting exercise because a reboot, you're taking the ingredients and you're doing it. And a remake is specific.
The idea of a reboot is to sort of like refresh the continuity, whereas like a remake tends to be focused on the one film.
Yes.
And just sort of reincorporating everything about that one film.
Yes. We're not talking about Spider-Man to Amazing Spider-Man here.
Yeah, that's a reboot.
That's a reboot. We're talking about remakes. And we will be going through a list of remakes we've compiled. Some of them good, some of them bad. We want to talk about which ones actually worked, which is very few, but there is some. And then there's the ones that have fallen flat in their face.
Yeah.
And there is a lot here.
There's a bunch. Remakes are interesting because they've always sort of been a thing in the medium.
Yeah.
Back in the olden days, even as far back as like black and white film, remakes were prevalent, and they would often actually be done by the same directors who directed the original. Stuff like Ten Commandments was directed by the same man who directed the original, and when it was brought into like a color version, there's The Bat, and then like The Bat Whispers as like a thing, which was one of the inspirations for Batman.
Yeah.
That was like remade by the same director. He's just like,
what?
I guess I could do that again.
Yeah, he's like, I could make that better.
To be fair, it was sort of, films didn't really have the sense of longevity that they did back then because there was like no home media.
Yeah, so it was just kind of like, people
sense.
Didn't see that 10 years ago, so let's make another one. And you're like, I guess.
You would think they're just like, just release it again. It's made. just more money with no effort.
And I feel like remakes, we're not talking about strictly perfect remakes. We're not talking shot for shot. We're talking basically trying to do the same concept again. And that there is some perfect ones. There is some perfect shot for shots. Weirdly, and I feel like this is the first one to bring up when we're talking scary, like weird remakes, is Psycho. Psycho is there's the original Psycho, Alfred Hitchcock, and then you have Psycho in the 1990s, Vince Vaughn as
Norman Bates,
and
directed by Gus Van Sant,
and it's shot for shot the same thing.
Yeah.
It's literally like we're talking remakes here. This is the definition. This is like they didn't do anything else other than be like, let's just replace the people and that's
it's
it.
in color now, I guess.
Yes, and that's it. And it's kind of super interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's it's basically like a film school assignment with money thrown at it. Yes. It's really weird.
It is really weird because I feel like with most remakes, they are trying to change it up. They're trying to make it different. Here, they're like, no, Psycho is perfect. Let's do it again. And you're like, wait, what? Like, and that's basically what this movie is. Like, sometimes it can feel really weird. It feels like they just like pasted Vince Vaughn over like the movie or something.
Yeah,
you know?
which my thing about the Psycho remake is, I will say this: a lot of people hate Vince Vaughn as Norman Bates. I've never thought he's been that bad. I think he's actually pretty good in that film.
Good.
The problem is the dialogue for me. Like, it's still, the movie still has to contend with like this old 1950s, 1960s dialogue.
And even though it looks modern.
Yeah, and it's just, there's this weird disconnect here. Like, modernize the dialogue a little bit and lean into that, and I feel like it would have been a much better fit.
Yeah, but, I mean, that may have just pissed off people just as much. Is that, like, just them changing that one little bit, you know? Like, so it's an interesting and controversial movie because it is the same thing. And, like... And I do enjoy it for the sake of what it is, but if I have to choose between, can I watch the original Psycho and this shot-for-shot remake from the 90s?
I mean, if you're morbidly curious, I guess. I think that's kind of the reason most people watch it
yes,
now.
But I'm saying if you've already seen both, and you know both, you're not going to go, man, I'm going to fucking watch Vince Vaughn do this instead of the original, like, instead of the master Alfred Hitchcock doing it, you know, like, that's the weird thing about that one for being shot for shot. And I want to say that's if they're going to remake a movie, this is not what I'm looking for. I am not here to tell you when I'm looking for a remake movie that this is I want the same thing as before, that the original's great, so why mess with the original? No, you should mess with the fucking original. Like, you should mess with it so much it shouldn't be thought of as a remake. It should be like, wow, that's fucking different, you know?
Yeah,
like,
it's sort of like damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yes.
Because you're just like, well, why would I see this if it's nothing like the original? So it's like, well, you have the original there. But then if you stray too far, then should it be called something different?
Yeah,
it's sort of a weird thing.
It is weird. And what's interesting about this one, and to bring up first, is that it's a perfect shot-for-shot remake for a horror film, and most of these remakes on our list are horror films.
Yeah, horror tends to be the big one. It's
interesting that I feel like horror's a genre where people look at the movies and they go, I could scare people better than that, which is interesting. I think, you know, like, and people do it all the time.
I think a big part of it is that horror tends to be cheaper entertainment.
Yeah,
like it tends to be lower budget fare. So the idea that could be a success is just like, well, we don't have to spend much on that.
Yeah.
Not only do we have the name recognition, but there's also the fact that these tend to be kind of low rent anyway, so why bother?
Yeah, that's true. And I think in the filmmaker's mind, they're like, oh, the CGI and the technology has caught up. I can make a scarier movie now than before. Yeah. Which... as many of these remakes prove, that's not the case. That's not the case. But I feel like an interesting. I mean, do we have an order for these, or do you want? Do we want? Can I jump? Like,
no, let's go in order, just because I feel like we're gonna jump around a bit and then might forget stuff on the list.
All right, that makes sense.
So this is all alphabetical, like usual.
Okay.
The first one is 310 to Yuma.
310 to Yuma. Okay, this is an interesting one because this is like Psycho. It's a pretty close to remake. It's not too different. It is different, of course, but because it's the Coen. Is it the Coen brothers?
No, the Coen brothers did True Grit.
True Grit. Sorry, my bad.
310 to Yuma was James Mangold.
Sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a really good Western. Like I like it's both of them are. You know, like that's the thing about 310 to Yuma is that the original's pretty darn good, and then the remake is
just like, oh, it's okay. That was pretty darn good.
Yeah, like, so
it's sort of a simpler one. Just like, that was good.
Which is the best you can hope for from a Hollywood remake. If they're gonna reuse a license, like you're like, oh, that was good. That was nice. Like I had a good time. Like
I did not mind that.
I did not get physically angry.
I think that's kind of like all there is to say about it. It's just like, oh, it's just sort of a modern take on it with a brand new cast, bringing the A-listers we have now, or at least back then.
Yeah, seriously. But it's a good one.
Yeah.
Solid one.
So the next one is the Coppola remake of Dracula.
Okay, so this is one of those big, I feel one of those big film history blunders is Dracula, because they're like, Coppola, master of filmmaking, like he can handle the dark, like he can handle Universal monsters. He's gonna bring back the age of Universal monsters. They got so excited. They brought in so many big people. Like, this movie just tries so damn hard to be an Oscar contender, to be like,
Definitely.
wow, like it's like Coppola is almost parodying himself in being like, haha, I can make a great, Oscar contender. And
the remake, the Bram Stoker, the Coppola Dracula film isn't perfect, but I have kind of a soft spot for it. I had never seen it when I was a kid. I'd seen it much, much later.
Okay.
And while it's very imperfect, and sometimes, to be honest, can be kind of slow and a chore to get through, it's there's something about it that I love.
That's how I feel about it. It is a chore to get through.
I love its sense of atmosphere. I love the practical effects. I love Gary Oldman in the parts. There's a lot to love about that movie, but
if anything I could say is Gary Oldman as Dracula is great. And
the score and everything, are just all the pieces are here, but they don't necessarily gel together all the time.
But that's why it's a that's why I say it's a blunder. It's a blunder. It's because they literally were just like, we bought all the best toys. Now all the best toys, you work together well. Go. And then the toys were like, no. And Keanu Reeves was like, no. And you were like, no, wait, what was that accent you just did, Keanu? And they were like, was that supposed to be British? And he's like, I'll try. And you're like, damn it. They're like,
yeah.
And that's,
I mean, everyone else actually fares pretty well, including Winona Ryder, who's actually pretty good in that.
She is.
Keanu's the only one that sticks out like a sore thumb.
And that's the problem. Is he comes in and he and you already are like, hey, is that Keanu Reeves? And then he hams it up and you're like, Jesus
That's the
Christ.
problem. Keanu Reeves is really good at a very specific type of role. You can't really make him someone like Jonathan Harker. That's not really within his range. Even now, it wouldn't really be.
No, and I think he's got more of a range now than he's ever had.
Yeah. I mean, Dracula was that was fresh off of Bill and Ted. It had to be,
really,
or maybe right before. I think Bill and Ted 1 was 89, so probably.
Yeah. But I do not enjoy that movie. I'm a huge fan of the original Universal monsters. I have the big giant set over there in Blu-ray on the warp shelf, and I really do love the Universal monster movies. We've talked about it before when we talk about the Invisible Man podcast. Check that one out.
It's a film that I can still go back to every now and again. It's not something I actively drool over.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of things I do like.
Yes,
and God, I love that opening scene. It's so fucking metal. It's that whole prologue where he's still Vlad the Impaler, and she dies, and then he curses and forsakes his religion, and then just fucking stabs the cross, and it bleeds, and the opera swells. And this is fucking dope.
All right,
and that's the thing. I think it tries to treat itself like this grand opera, it's very operatic.
That's what I mean. It definitely is it's very full of itself. It thinks it's bigger than it is, and you're just like, yeah, but it's kind of not, though. Yeah. That's kind of the whole problem for me, is you're like, I'd rather not. and oh my God, Dracula's been remade so many times.
Oh, yeah.
If we're talking, you're talking just Bram Stoker's Dracula, but there's been Dracula Untold.
It was Untold.
Untold, that's bad.
The Luke Evans one.
Yeah, that one's bad. There's
Dracula 2000 back in the day. That was a thing.
That was bad. There's so many Dracula ones that are just no good. There was the
BBC miniseries that was more sort of a reimagining of the tale.
Oh yeah. Not and was that any good?
I liked it. The third episode kind of gets weird.
Okay.
The third episode gets weird, but I dug the first episode. It was sort of a twist on the entire thing. It's told by Jonathan Harker, but while he's in an asylum and kind of falling apart because he's kind of become like this Reddenfield type character, and the characterization of Dracula is very different. But it's interesting.
Cool.
It's very much just like, would you like to see what the creators of Sherlock would do to Dracula? It's just like in every positive and negative connotation for that.
Right.
That's basically it.
They're like, you want to see what Doctor Who's creators would do with Dracula? Like, you're like, wait. Yeah, I mean, there's that.
That's about it.
That's about it. That's all. That's a bunch of them.
The next one is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Oh goodness. Okay, so Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I love that movie as a
love
kid.
Willy Wonka and the Chocolate
Yeah,
Factory.
I
always
love
forget
Willy
that
Wonka.
there is the title difference.
It's the title difference.
Yeah.
Okay, it's Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I love that movie.
Yeah.
And I used to work at a summer camp being a counselor, and we used to play that for kids on rainy days. And like, it's one of those things that like kids still love that movie. You know, like it's one of those things that it's great. It's a classic, and it's great for so many reasons, and it's so good that it's almost offensive that they were trying to do a remake.
Yeah.
And then when I heard Tim Burton, I got hopeful. I remember when this was coming out. Like, this was one of those things that
just
this
the
is like a
idea
part
of
of
just
my
like
I was like, oh wow, great.
This was before like we knew that Tim Burton was going off the rails.
Yeah.
So it was just like the idea of someone like Tim Burton tackling a project like that.
Like, well, any Dahl project. Like,
Yeah.
like Dahl is a great writer because he's got this this style, this like spindly, scary style. You know,
and
like
there's also sort of like it's also kind of morbid too.
Yeah.
There's some like dark stuff that happens in those books.
yeah, and you would think that Tim Burton's style would fit into that, and they've set, and it has before with James and the Giant Peach.
Yeah.
But this time, I don't know where the man who created James and the Giant Peach went, because he didn't make this movie. Like,
Yeah, Roald Dahl was long since done after that. It actually wasn't Tim Burton who directed James and the Giant Peach, so just to clarify.
sorry, I did not realize that.
It was Henry Selick.
Right,
The
sorry.
the
The same guys who did Nightmare
Before Christmas, which is another movie
Yes.
people think Tim Burton directed.
and he did it. He produced it. So
Yeah.
that's the reason why I'm doing the jump. Sorry. But, sorry.
No, it's fine. Everyone makes that mistake.
Obviously.
Same thing with Nightmare Before Christmas. Everyone
Yeah.
thinks that Tim Burton directed because his name's all over.
Yeah,
it.
Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas. But it's real, and that's really what's important here is that Tim Burton's a good director. Remake wise, he's a culprit on this list several times.
He's for some reason he has a lot of remakes under his belt, and he's gonna keep coming up.
A lot of adaptations. Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like Tim Burton. He loves a good genre film. That's what he is. He's a genre filmmaker, and he likes to adapt things. And it shows that because most of his licenses are remakes, adapted from books. The only ones that he's done that are not are his own original works, and they're adaptations of his things. You know, like, and you're like, all right,
Yeah,
like,
it's such a weird position to be in.
it's very strange, and you know, it's something that you like. You want to see Tim Burton succeed because he has succeeded before, and then since he's gone off the deep end, you can't trust him. But this was one of the start of the deep end. This was this was,
And
I mean, there was. We're going to talk about it later.
We'll talk about
We'll
it.
talk about it
Yeah.
later. But there was that.
They should have known.
Oh, they should have known
that
that.
one. But it's one of those things. I can't believe he's going to show up like a few more times later. But between
Right.
this and Dracula, it's a good example of just because you're more faithful to the original source material does not mean you're going to be better.
Yes. So, I mean, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is not like the book. Dahl was against
Willy
the movie.
Wonka and the Chocolate
Yeah,
Factory.
sorry. Damn it. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory was not faithful to the book. And Dahl didn't like that. He was outspoken about that, said that he didn't like how the movie going different from what he originally wrote.
Which is weird because it doesn't really take all that many liberties.
No,
It's like, it adds...
changes the ending, but like this much, just to cap it off. I feel
Yeah,
like
it changes the ending to have a more complete self-contained story. And yeah, it adds fizzy lifting drinks and a couple of other scenes that weren't in the book.
Yes.
So what?
So what? Yeah, like I really wasn't. None of the added scenes offended me.
Yeah.
As a guy who's read the book, seen both movies, that never.
Apparently, that was like his main point of contention. It was like he didn't like the idea of Gene Wilder as Willy Wonka, which is hilarious.
Which is hilarious because if I think about perfect castings in this world, like what Gene Wilder is Willy Wonka is
and to be fair, that is part of him like making the character his own.
Yes.
Because the characterization of like Wonka in the book versus the film is different.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those things where like, this is my character now, I've made it my own. And like it was between Gene Wilder and I guess he had like a real problem with the fizzy lifting drink scene for some reason.
Really?
Just
because it was scary. Like because it was scary.
No idea. I don't know. Scarier stuff seemed to happen otherwise.
Yeah, right. But that's what. Okay, so that's one of my favorite things about Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah, Willy Wonka is the old one.
I keep doing it.
Yeah, the director Willy changed Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is the name of the novel in the Burton film. They changed it to Willy Wonka because they felt like Wonka's really the star of the film, so they changed the title that way.
So Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, it's this great movie that it feels innocent and light from when you're in it. It feels like, wow, but if you think about the entirety of it, it's all dark and morbid and you feel it when you're in the movie. You're like you start the movie and you're like, wow, this kid's so hopeful, and then you're like, oh, but he's so poor, and then you're like, oh, but look, he might get a chocolate. Oh, he goes to the chocolate thing, and oh, but all these people are dicks, and you're like, and it's kind of one of those things that like it's constantly being like, wow, oh, wow, oh, wow, and that's what's great about the movie is it like at the same time as making you hopeful and like, wow, look at all this candy aesthetic. It's dark and morbid, and Gene Wilder is like dangerous, like as Willy, and it's one of those things that you're just like,
it's one of those things where like that version of Willy Wonka, like if he wasn't into candy, he might have become a much more dangerous person.
Yeah, exactly. It's like oh, is this a serial killer? And I feel like that changed. Like generations of people, watching these movies. Not only were they mortified by the tunnel sequence of Willy Wonka,
which comes out of nowhere.
It comes out of nowhere
and like serves no purpose at all.
But it's one of those. I feel like I feel like everybody and their mother's been afraid of like ceiling fans because of those fizzy lifting drink scene, like it's one of those.
That's fair.
It's one of those scenes that like seems so innocent, but you're like, it's kind of nerve wracking, and it feels very like it's like the director just came in and was like, what if there was a horror movie in the middle of this fucking scene right here, right now? And you're like, whoa.
The weirdest thing about the original film is that it still has like this timelessness to it.
Yeah.
Whereas
Charlie looks exactly like a 2000s film. Like, like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory could be any time. 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s,
yeah, it
tries
not to be too specific about its time period, whereas Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is really like already feels dated.
Yeah, extreme.
It felt dated a couple years after it came out.
I've seen some clips recently we were watching some videos earlier. It just looks bad the whole time. You're just like, what happened here? No one spent any money on this fucking movie, okay, so let's actually talk about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, because we've been talking about Willy Wonka and how much of a classic it is, and it really did affect a generation of kids. And then you have Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which has bamboozled a generation into watching that movie instead of Willy Wonka. Yeah. I feel like when people are online and they're looking for Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, they see Charlie, they click it, and all of a sudden they're watching the Tim Burton film and they're like, ah, shit, I didn't mean this one, and they have to back out. That's what happens for this movie, because if you ever were a fan of the original and you see this one, you kind of just sit there going, Jesus Christ, what the fuck is going on here? Like, I remember being so angry the first time watching it, and it's just because I grew up watching Willy Wonka.
Yeah, so
like,
did I. I wasn't necessarily angry coming out of it because it just looked kind of off from the start.
Yeah.
Just the idea of it sounded interesting, but I think after that first trailer, I'm like, ooh. And then so coming out of it, I'm just like, I don't know what I expected.
I don't know what I expected.
I expect nothing, and I'm still let down.
And that's really it, is that this is like, if you went in being like, wow, this kind of looks bad, and then you see the movie, you're like, oh, yeah, it was bad.
Yeah, and
Like-
it has its own like weird subplot and like sense of humor. It's just an awkward watch
It really is.
the entire time. Like Johnny Depp, of
you
course,
don't know if you should laugh, like, be creeped out. Like,
I feel like if you laugh, it's only to laugh to be like to like make yourself not feel uncomfortable. It's one of those. And like Johnny Depp is Willy Wonka. Johnny Depp has range. I'm sure he could have done a great job.
Yeah.
But like the characterization that they wanted to make him sort of like this isolated man child with like who has daddy issues for some reason.
Yeah.
You're like, what?
Gene Wilder's characterization of like the aloof billionaire that doesn't hang out with people works so much better than this man childness. You know, like
It's weird because the film.
like, yeah, of course, man childness might come with a candy factory, but it seems so.
It doesn't seem sustainable.
No, it doesn't.
Like this type of man I don't think would have ever really hit it big like he does.
Yeah, and you're like, what? What the fuck?
It's funny.
It's
It's weird because the film called Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is more about Charlie, and the film called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is actually more about Wonka.
yeah, and you're like, wait, what?
Because Charlie's more of the main character focus in the original film.
Yeah.
But then the remake has like the whole subplot of like Wonka's childhood. His dad was Christopher Lee. And he
Yeah.
didn't treat him so well. He was a dentist. Or like, why is this here?
And I'm not gonna say Christopher Lee should not. Christopher Lee was great in that role there, you know, like as he always is.
I wish Christopher Lee was my dad.
But it's the movie's disappointing in a lot of ways. It's one of those things that Tim Burton did go all the way Tim Burton. Like, you know, I feel like Edward Scissorhands and a few other of those movies are Frankenweenie are like are all the way Tim Burton cranked. You know, like on a scale to 1 to Tim Burton, it was fucking a skeleton with a suit attached
With
to it.
pinstripes all
Yeah,
over
yeah,
it.
yeah, like, you know, it was a 2-headed dog. You know, like, exactly. It's like one of those things that, like, there's certain movies
Batman
where
Returns is like an 8.
It's a, yes.
on like out of 10 for like the Burton scale. It's definitely
Exactly.
more Burton than 89 is.
Yes, because 89, I feel like the studio was like, hey, give us a Batman movie. And he was like, cool. And they were like,
Yeah,
Then
and the
Batman
only
Returns,
thing-
they were like, hey, give us a Tim Burton movie. And he was like,
Yeah, and the only other thing he had directed at that point besides like some shorts was Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
yeah.
So
You know, like, you're like, you guys know what you're getting into, right? Like, and Pee Wee Herman's definitely Tim Burton cranked to the max there. Even though it's Pee Wee Herman aesthetic, it's definitely like him cranking his
I want to
style.
talk about stuff
to-
that creeped me out as a kid was like anything Pee Wee Herman related. I couldn't do it.
Oh, I couldn't do
I would
it
watch
either.
like slasher movies where people have their guts ripped open, but I would look at Pee Wee Herman like, I don't trust that dude.
But he doesn't crank it here, and this, and that's literally why you hire Tim Burton, is to crank that motherfucker, and he does not. This is the start of Tim Burton using CGI instead of physical sets, and so you have, again, we'll talk about the other movie, which is the death of him using physical sets because he doesn't use it enough.
Yeah.
But here is the start of Tim Burton going, I can do CGI everything, can't I? And then you have the Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass movies where they were just like, CGI everything? Every little
Alice in
thing?
Wonderland is definitely going to come up again because Disney's like a whole
Yeah,
can
it's
of
a whole
worms.
bag. But it's one of those things where Tim Burton realized he could just like do it later instead of coming up with beforehand, you know, which like sure that works with his style, I guess, of being able to like do whatever he
Yeah,
wants.
he definitely comes off as like sort of a stream of consciousness guy, like when I'm inspired.
Yes, but it doesn't work here, and it shows in the shot of, if you compare the shot of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory when they first walk into the room and it's all candy and everything's edible, and then you have Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and they first walk into that room, it just looks gray, you know, in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It's like you walk into the other one and the music starts and it's beautiful.
Yeah, it
everything
has, like,
looks
this
plastic. You want to lick everything in there. And then you see the shot in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and you're like, ugh.
The only point I'll give to that like version of like the candy like river and stuff like the chocolate river is that in the remake it actually looked like chocolate, whereas like in the original it looks like Yoo-hoo.
Yes, it definitely.
That's like the only point I'll
yes
give. But aside from that, there's like a sense of magic and wonder in the first one that's just like missing all throughout.
All completely.
And I mean, sure, it's more faithful to the book. They kept all like the Oompa Loompa songs from the book and they kept it word for word, and that was boring.
Yeah, you're like, oh, all right.
And then they had like the weird gimmick where like every song like progressed into a new like decade of a particular music.
Yeah,
that was like the gimmick throughout. Like as the songs progressed, I'm like, okay, at least I mean, I guess you're trying something.
It's just, it's just one of those movies that's better forgotten. Is definitely it. You know,
there's also stuff like the ambiguity. Like I preferred that the original. They don't really tell you what happens to the kids.
To the kids,
after.
they're like, what happened to the kids? I don't know.
Leave it to your imagination. Whereas like the remake kind of cops out and like shows it's like, okay, they're all fine. Yeah, one of them may be blue, one of them might be like stretchy. And
but I
now,
hated the effects of the stretchy person. It like literally made me laugh in the theater. I remember going to see it in theaters and laughing at that because that was so bad. Mm-hmm. I was like, what the fuck? Like that is so ugly looking, and you put that on screen, Tim Burton. Like, and you're just like, whatever. It's basically. Keep yourself to the Charlie and the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Fuck.
The original one. The old one.
The old one. Fucking that one.
The Gene Wilder one. So next up is Dawn of the Dead.
Now this is an interesting one because I love both of them.
Aside from like the basic skeleton, they're very different movies.
Yeah, they are. And of course you have this makes the classic debate: fast zombie versus slow zombie. Yeah. Because you have the original with slow zombies, and then you have this one where is this who directed this? This is Zack
Snyder directed.
Zack Snyder.
Yeah.
Zack Snyder was like, "Yo, they can run now," and it definitely begins this trend of like we have fast zombies now, which there was fast zombies before, but this is like the start of the trend.
To be honest, it just makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like things are going to change with the times. Like for me, my thing is...
to be more aggressive, to be more action-packed.
My thing is like with zombies very easily become tired. Yeah. Like sure, you have like the thematic nuance. Like, you know, there's that whole thing that like Dawn of the Dead is really about consumerism because they're all a bunch of zombies walking in a mall. Yeah. Like that sort of thing. Everyone's talked about that. But just beyond that, like just the physical threat of zombies just gets so passe so easily, especially once it becomes oversaturated, that adding a cool gimmick to it works for me. Like, you want to make them run now? Fine. You want to, if you play The Last of Us, it's like, oh, you want them to be like these weird fungus, like cordyceps things? Like, cool. It's something different.
Yeah, it's something. I'm a big zombie fan. I used to do this thing where I used to try to watch all the zombie films I could, every last one I could find. And I love Dawn of the Dead because the original, because of the mall. I love the mall setting. I think it's great. I think it works so well. And it feels like a true evolution of George Romero being like, and then what if I did this with the zombies? Yeah. You know, like
Dawn of the Dead is definitely like the favorite amongst, if you want to call it the Dead, like that original Dead
of the
trilogy.
Dead trilogy.
I'm actually the weirdo who likes Day of the Dead the most.
Yeah?
Yeah, the one where they're in the bunker.
Yeah?
For like most of it.
Really?
I like that one because that one's the one that's really just like, man is the true monster.
Yes.
More so than the first two.
I don't know. Night of the Living Dead, the original, is very much like, but who is the real monster?
But that's also sort of an easy one of just like in chaos when the chips are down, everyone's going to tear each other apart. Whereas like in Day of the Dead, they kind of have the situation under control and it still falls apart.
They take each other apart.
People suck. And plus,
Fair enough.
And plus, I feel like there are some more memorable like gore set pieces, and
Yes.
the practical effects in Day of the Dead are amazing.
See that? Yeah, I feel like that's a lot of the Dead series, the original Romero movies. That's what's super great about them.
Fun fact,
the practical effects are
Day of the Dead
top-notch.
is actually Edgar Wright's favorite too.
Really?
Of the three, yeah.
That's funny. So we're talking Dawn of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and I do like the remake because it moves fast. You know, like as much as the zombies are moving fast, it's able to take the premise and just go zoop. You know,
Yeah,
like,
and the thing about the remake is that it's a little more fun because you have that entire period where like the zombies aren't coming in and everyone's just kind of hanging out at the mall for a while.
Yeah.
And that whole thing is kind of fun. It's just like, well, we just kind of live in a world with no consequences. We could just hang out at this mall, have everything we need. If we're bored, we'll shoot some zombies outside on the roof until everything falls apart. But taking that as well as like new things they decided to add, like pregnant woman who got bitten, and like, oh my god, we gonna see a zombie baby, and we see a zombie baby.
Yeah, and you're like, no. It's one of those things about horror movies where it's fine to do this remake. I feel like Evil Dead remake, it's not as offensive because they do enough to flip it and to be its own thing, that this really stands out as being like, oh, cool, nice. You know, like, I had a good time at this thing, instead of like, we'll talk about it later, but Nightmare on Elm Street, and I go, what the fuck was that? Why the fuck did they do this? You know, like, but this is one of the horror movie remakes where you go, that was a good time.
Yeah. So just to mix things up, here comes not so good times. It's all Disney.
It all Disney. So okay, so where do we start with Disney though? Because remakes,
I'm gonna start with Disney,
they
I'm
remake
thinking
their things every couple years.
Yeah, they do. I'm thinking specifically, just to keep it light, is kind of Alice in Wonderland on.
Alice in Wonderland on? Okay, because everything they've done is a remake of something they have done before.
Yeah, that is true. Like, each one is sort of an adaptation in and of itself.
Yeah.
And they've done remakes before, but we're also in that age of, like, them starting to remake, like, the
Their
Renaissance
own
films.
things, yeah.
Like, from the 90s and early 2000s. And they're all bad.
All bad. And I hear some people will probably be arguing, being like, there's some good ones, but there's...
I didn't mind the Jungle Book.
Yes.
That wasn't from the Renaissance, but that's like the only one of these modern ones that I've liked.
See, but there's where it works. So Jungle Book changes things up a little bit.
Yeah.
It's not afraid to be different. It knows that it is not just a complete shot-for-shot remake of an animated film, unlike Beauty and the Beast, which has its issue of being like, Beauty and the Beast is like, I want to be a shot-for-shot of the cartoon, but also we gotta include feminism, which I'm not saying that we shouldn't include feminism in a movie. I'm just saying that movie was constantly like, yeah, but did you know Belle was a feminist? And you're like, yeah, I got it from the first one. Like,
oh man,
which, like, I get what Disney's trying to do there. I'm just
it
saying,
tries to be like the exact same thing again to remind you why you liked a much better movie when you were
exactly.
a kid.
That's the problem with that type of remake. Is I immediately go, hey, can I just watch the original now?
And then it's damning even further because what little new stuff they do add, the new stuff is always bad.
Yeah, like
I did not need to know that the Beast was a jerk because his dad beat him.
Yeah, you're like, oh. Okay.
I didn't need any of that, nor did I need a subplot that, like, Belle's mom died in a plague, nor did I need a stupid teleporting book, which they never use after that.
No, yeah, like, it's just stuff where you're like, what are we up to now? What are we up to?
Nor did I need the original songs, which stick out like a sore thumb.
They really do, and it's not the only one that tries to do original songs. Lion King also thinks, hey, the stage musical, fuck that thing. Even though it won a fuckload of Tonys for its original music, fuck that movie. We're gonna come up with our own by Beyonce. And then you're like, but did you did you have to? Like, is kind of how you feel when they start to play. So Disney, I feel like after Jungle Book, they decide, even though people like Jungle Book, they decide we should try to go for pretty much the same thing, but updated. Instead of Alice in Wonderland, which was...
It was very different.
It was very different.
Not in a good way.
Not in a good way. And then Jungle Book, which is different, they start to go, hey, we should try to make it pretty much the same thing.
The weirdest thing about Alice in Wonderland is you think of all people that a Tim Burton version of Alice in Wonderland would
work.
Be super interesting.
Would fucking work. You like if you in the 80s you were like, hey. I mean in the early 90s you were like, hey. This guy, he's going to make a Alice in Wonderland movie. I'd be like, fucking hell yeah. But now you see it and you're like, Jesus Christ. Like, I remember seeing that in theaters and walking out and saying to my friend, I don't remember what just happened in there. Like, it was so forgettable and like not fun that I just was like, I literally don't know what I just witnessed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it like is gone from my brain already, you know? Like, it's just no...
And then the unfortunate thing about like Jungle Book working and Lion King apparently not. I haven't seen it because I'm not really in a rush.
Yeah,
you've seen it.
Yeah, I've seen Lion King. So the reason why Lion King doesn't work, for several reasons, is aesthetic wise. Somebody said to Jon Favreau, do it exactly like a lion. You know, somebody told him, don't you make them cartoony at all.
It's a mix of Lion King being much more beloved than the Jungle Book. So it's just like, well, no, we can't afford to change much because people like Lion King way more than Jungle Book. Don't change anything.
But that's
then
the
there's
problem.
Also...
is that they did change a lot of things. So they changed they don't want to change the content of the story, but they changed that everything has to be realistic and look like a real thing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Do big
it seems like they got
dancing numbers.
They got too high on just like the technical aspects of it. They got really big on the technology. Just like, look how photorealistic we can make these lions.
Like, wow, yeah.
Just like, yeah, here's the thing, guys. The animals in Jungle Book looked plenty photorealistic too, but they could also still express.
Yeah, and that's really it, is that the entire movie, you're like, can they make a face, please? You know, like, they try a little bit, but it's just so much so that you're kind of like, I can tell it's not right, you know, like, and if they went further, yes, it would not look realistic. And I'm sure that is what they were saying the whole time. They're like, well, if they talked like this a little bit more, it wouldn't be super realistic. And you're like, yeah, but it would be fun. It would be nice. Like, you want this to be as fun and nice. Don't you want this to be fun? Don't you want this cartoon about lions to be fun?
No.
And they're like, no. And that's really it, is that definitely that movie gets better once they get to the second half and Dog Lover comes in and he's singing as Simba. But the beginning half, they try to be so realistic that they basically chop up the movie to be realistic, you know? Like, and you're just kind of like, And the main problem there is Timon and Pumbaa. Is that Timon and Pumbaa are very cartoony. The way they move, the way they run about is cartoony.
They're the comic relief.
They're the comic relief, and they can't do any of that here. Billy Eichner is fantastic as Timon, but Seth Rogen as Pumbaa, it seems like an obvious casting. Like, you're like, yeah, sure.
Like typecasting.
Yeah, you're like, sure. But in reality, he doesn't bring anything to the role, and you're kind of just left being like, no, you know, like that you shouldn't have done that. And it's a weird film also because when we're talking about remakes, because it's one of the only Disney remakes where they actually brought back the original talent to do stuff. We still have James Earl Jones
as Mufasa, and there's also still like Ellen, John, and Tim Rice supervising the new versions of like the score and the song,
which
and Hans
is
Zimmer's
really
back, too.
cool.
Yeah.
Is really cool, but it leads this movie to being almost similar in certain ways, and that's where it's detriment to itself.
Yeah, that's why I had seen the arguments because James Earl Jones was brought back. It's like, why don't you just bring everything back? It's like, then no.
Yeah, then don't do it.
Yeah, so it's sort of just like, if you're gonna go for it, you have to go all the way. You can't just half-ass it. We're just like, well, we'll have to bring James Earl Jones back, because the most immediate thing people are gonna ask, well, why don't you just bring Jeremy Irons back too?
Yeah, and that's the thing is, Scar is no good. Like it, and sure, he tries real hard, but you could. It's just he takes away all this menacingness that the original Scar voice actor Jeremy Irons has.
Yeah, and I mean, he is played by a good actor in the remake. It's Chiwetel Ejiofor,
and
who's
he's great.
A fantastic actor, and we've seen him play villains before.
He just doesn't bring it here as much as, and that's the thing is James Earl Jones is bringing it. He's and he's fantastic as Mufasa, but you kind of go, but everyone else is weaker comparatively. So.
Yeah, which is weird because, again, if you look at Jungle Book to compare, we were able to do this.
Yeah.
Like, Shere Khan is characterized very differently in the remake than he is in the original.
Yeah.
It's Idris Elba.
Yeah.
And yet Idris Elba has, like, such a menace about him. It's a very, like, different, more ruthless, like, Shere Khan as opposed to, like, the more, like, sophisticated. Yeah. Just like, I'll have to... He's like, I'll manipulate you first, but if I have to get up and do something, like, we're going to have a problem.
Exactly. And it really... The thing about having James Earl Jones there is that it's so interesting to hear his voice change. Mm-hmm. He's saying the same lines, because they didn't change him, of course. No. And he's saying the same lines, but now he's older, which is actually kind of nice. It gives Mufasa this like old sounding. It adds this even more of a Shakespearean atmosphere to it, But that's the problem, is that is a different tone than what the rest of the cast is capturing when you have Beyonce talking to Danny Glover, and it's just one of those things that you're like,
It'll be something I watch out of morbid curiosity. I'm not exactly rushing to watch it.
It's just one of those things that the movie finished and I was like, I just want to watch the original Lion King right now.
That's
because
pretty
that
much
was
how
not
like most of these go. The only one, like Beauty and the Beast, was one of those things where like I came out of it just like, all right, and then after a while I'm just like, well, that was bad.
Yeah.
Like Jungle Book I liked, Lion King I haven't seen. I think the only one that kind
I
of
haven't seen Aladdin yet. But
Aladdin was the one that started to like really make me mad.
Yeah. Because I wasn't gonna see it. Because I from birth I've been like a huge Aladdin fan. Like my family quotes Aladdin all the time in our house, and it's just one of those things that I would not want it to be ruined in any way. And for them, when I heard it was bad, I was like, well, then no. Like, and you're just saying it's bad. No, that's your review of it.
That's very bad. Here's the thing. One, it's plagued by the same problem that all of these have. Is, for one, they refuse to get anyone who can actually like sing in these.
Yeah, you're like, wait.
So they tried to
you guys have all the money in the world. Hire people who can sing.
So they decide to just like compensate by autotune, and they do it for everyone, and it's so damn awkward. And just beyond that, the changes they make are just dumb. Everything just feels so sterile and underwhelming. Like the Cave of Wonders, it's just kind of like this lion, this like big cat shaped hole in a mountain. I'm just like, as opposed to like this thing that forms in the desert and has like a presence.
See, that's the thing, is that so you're taking animated cartoons, which is a very expressive medium, and then you're like, but if we make it realistic,
but here's the thing,
and
like,
it's not expressive.
Aside from Genie and a few things, stuff like that still could have translated to live action. You could have done the Cave of Wonders pretty well live action with CG and still make it look realistic for this version. But you decided to just give us a sterile, boring version of it.
You're just like, ooh.
Even stuff like, the one thing that I was hoping for, they couldn't even do this right. I'm just like, this movie sucks, but can I at least have my fight with the snake, with the giant snake, and have it be live action just so I can enjoy seeing that? And no, they can't even give me that.
Jesus.
They change up like the entire climax, and it's so much worse.
Really?
Yeah.
Jesus, no. I just didn't. That's the thing is, I was just like, no, I'm not watching that. I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
I know it's free on the Disney Plus, and I'll get to it eventually, I guess, when I'm drunk. But I'm not doing it right now. I'm just like, no. And basically, for most of these Disney remakes, I'm basically saying no. You know, when they talk
To be
about
honest,
them,
the more they seem to change things, the more I seem to be like into it. Like, I'm not really interested in the Mulan remake, but because they're changing so much, it makes me a little more interested in it because they're changing so much.
Because if they were just like, hey, we're taking everything out, we're keeping everything in but Mushu, I would have been angry. But because they're like, hey, we're trying to make it authentic.
Yeah, more accurate to like the mythology and like the legend.
Yeah. I'm not saying more realistic because there's still a lady who turns into a fucking bird in the trailer, so I don't know how realistic they're going for. But
just more accurate to the culture and folklore.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, okay, fine. I hope it's good. But then again, like Mulan was never really one I was super attached to. So
Really? Well, I was a big Mulan fan.
Mulan's fine.
Yeah.
I like it fine. But it was never like one of my favorites. Like favorite as a kid was always like Aladdin and Lion King, and then when I got older it became Hunchback.
So you know what I say to all these remakes Disney movies? I'm always just like, you cowards at Disney, give me a live action Goofy movie this instant. How
What
fucking messed up would that be?
How horrifying abomination do you want? You really think about this, Frank. Live action
I know.
Goofy.
This is the same people. Can you imagine like the Cats graphics, but on a whole Goofy movie? Like, that's exactly what I'm picturing them doing. You know, like if they were like, yeah, we can do a Goofy movie.
I think the benefit is that a Goofy movie, while a good movie, is more of a cult thing, so they probably won't touch it. They probably
won't touch it.
I know they were like planning on. They still have like a bunch in the works. They were planning on Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Yeah, and we have the
sure.
remake of Lady and the Tramp in there, which I have not seen. But I hear that's pretty much the same thing, but with live dogs. So you're just like, okay,
but
like,
I don't know. Maybe
I'm surprised they haven't done Aristocats.
After I don't know if that's still on the table, not just because of like the quarantine stuff, but because after Notre Dame burned down, I'm wondering if they're just like, let's wait on that.
Yeah,
good, wait on it forever and then don't do it.
Yeah, exactly. Let it die in production hell.
I'll tell you what, though, if it was up to me, you know who'd be a perfect choice for Frollo?
Who?
Peter Capaldi.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That'd be good. All right, I'm in it. We greenlit it.
Oh, great. I put it out into the universe.
And look what you've done.
Now it's guaranteed.
Yeah, it's going to happen. No, everything's pushed back forever.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, Black Widow's going to come out in June. And I was like, no. Like, I was just like, that's it.
Warner Brothers is waiting it out with like Wonder Woman still.
Yeah.
I think they're just like, we're going to push it back to like fall or winter. Which I get. I just want to see Wonder Woman, man. Like, the original release date was supposed to be, like, spring this year. It would have come out before this quarantine stuff happened. Mm-hmm. But then they had already pushed it back once. And then, mostly, I think, because they didn't want it to, like, compete with something else in theaters, plus Joker was around the same time. We would have had it already, man. I just want to watch Wonder Woman. But Disney is done. On to the next thing.
Disney is dead.
Dead.
I mean, over.
Evil Dead.
So yeah, I brought it up earlier, is that this one, I'm a big so Evil Dead in the series is an interesting talk about remakes, because the original Evil Dead is the original Evil Dead, and then you have Evil Dead 2, which is a remake of Evil Dead.
Sort of, yeah, because they reshot the opening because they didn't have rights to the first film, but it changes the context because it's just Ash and his girlfriend as opposed to all of his friends.
Because it is not, that's the thing, it puts the two on there, but in reality, it's the same fucking plot again, you know? Like, and you're kind of like, oh, cool.
It sums up the original plot again in like a prologue that they reshot, and then it gets on to the new stuff. So that's sort of an interesting spot. The weird thing about like Ash versus Evil Dead is that they kind of sort of hand wave it away. They're just like, both happened, whatever.
Yeah, they're like,
just don't think about it too hard.
They're like, Ash gets in trouble a lot. Yeah. What do we say? But then and then you have the actual, like, most people thinking about remakes. We have the Evil Dead remake from 2000. Oh man, I think I want to see 16.
I want to say 13.
And this is they go okay, but what if it was a woman? And you're like, all right, I'm there, all right. And then they're like, yeah, but what if we got a lot of blood? And you're like, wait, how much blood are we talking? And they're like, it's gonna rain blood.
Just like, what if we took that budget and instead of like sanding off the edges of Evil Dead, instead tried to actually like dial it up a bit?
Yeah.
And they're just like, yeah, let's do that.
And I think Evil Dead 2 is one of the best horror films / comedies ever. So it's hard to compete with this remake. But the Evil Dead remake holds
and to
itself
be fair, it is
up.
trying to be more like the original film than it is trying to be like 2.
Yeah.
2 was funny only in the sense that it was like this amateurish film with a lot of bad actors.
No, it's funny because of Bruce Campbell's physical acting and because he wants it to be kind of like Sam Raimi wants it to be kind of like Three Stooges but with real fucking blood, you know? Like,
yeah, but that really comes into play with the second one.
Yes, that's what I mean. The second one.
The first one has like none of that slapstick stuff.
No, it's
that's
very
what I'm saying,
straightforward
like,
a horror movie.
The remake is more in line with the first film.
Yes, absolutely.
Which, fine. I usually tend with, like, installments in, like, a horror franchise or series, tend to lean more towards the one that kind of leans more horrors anyway. It's why I, like, prefer Terminator 1, even though Terminator 2 is better. It's why I prefer Alien to Aliens. I just prefer it being straight horror.
All right.
Not that making it more action-y or making it, like, horror comedy isn't a bad thing.
Yes. And so, the Evil Dead remake, now what stands out to you as being the real factor that wins you over this remake?
Well, I had already said that it doesn't try to sand the edges off rather than just like dial it up. It has a lot of polish. It feels like there's actually some like passion thrown at it. And the fact that it tries to be so practical and so dirty and so grimy, it just feels so genuine.
Exactly. And I think that's where it is that there's some love there.
And it helps that like Campbell and Raimi were involved in a producer's capacity, but like actually involved in a producer's capacity to try and act as a guiding hand.
Yeah.
As opposed to similar projects like this that happen where they have a producer credit, but they're really just there to have their name on it.
They're just like the names on it to say it has its blessing instead of like I helped make it. And I feel like that's really it, is that this Evil Dead remake feels like it's got love in it, and that's real. They love the original.
And plus, at the time it came out, it was so refreshing to be like, oh my god, this is so gory and gross, and it's all practical blood and squibs and no CG bullshit, using CG properly when you need to. It's great.
I think it's definitely up there with some of the great like horror remakes is Evil Dead. Absolutely. No question. So moving on down the list, on to Past Evil Dead.
Past Evil Dead, I have a fistful of dollars.
A fistful of dollars. So this is an interesting one because this one's one of those that's old as film history itself. No, I'm just kidding.
It's pretty old now.
Pretty fucking old, though. We have the original Yo Jimbo. Akira Kurosawa. Sorry, I'm just gonna keep saying half names at Deshaun so he pronounces it right. If you guys were not picking up on that, I say half names so that way Deshaun can say the last name right, and I don't sound like an idiot like I normally do. But basically, it's a if you've seen a Fistful of Dollars, Yo Jambo or Fistful of Dollars, either one first, you'll be like, wow, it's the same plot. Like,
yeah, it really is. It wouldn't be the last of these sort of taking what was originally like a Japanese, more of a samurai film, and adapting it as a Western. Because there is an interesting cultural thing to that, because people did kind of describe the Old West as sort of like feudal Japan for the West.
Yeah, exactly.
And so like the lone gunslinger is a lot like a Ronin samurai in that respect. So it's interesting how it actually translates as well as it does.
Yeah. And it's one of those both films are just absolute badasses of a film. Like, both of them are full of great action and really just the character being this like great drifter character and still feeling connected to him instead of being like, oh, he's just so dangerous. Like, you know, like that's really the most people think like that. In reality, that's what really rings true about those movies, is that even though they're not giving you his name, you're still able to connect with the character.
And the 2 sequels would go more into their original thing.
Yes.
And mostly for the better. Like, I prefer A Fistful of Dollars for a few dollars more, but the good, the bad, and the ugly is the GOAT.
Yeah, yes, of course it is, but it's hard to talk about those because we have to talk about what those are different remakes, you know.
Yeah,
like,
those are different movies.
Those are different movies. If we're talking for those two, Fistful of Dollars, Clint Eastwood brings this stance here that forever will change how guys want to stand in action movies, you know. Like, it really is. It's just one of those things that, like, he's able to, like, stand in this, like, menacing way that forever on people were like, yeah, I want to do that.
What a furrowed brow.
What a furrowed brow. And that's not the only remake of that movie. There is a Bruce Willis one. I'm trying to remember the name of it. Bruce Willis. Fuck, what the fuck is it called? It's the same plot. It's the same exact thing, but they were like, yeah, but what if he had really fast guns? Last Man Standing. That's what it's called. Really? Last Man Standing. It's the same exact plot as Yo Jimbo and for Fistful of Dollars. And it's Bruce Willis and Bruce Dern, and, like, it's just the same thing. There's no, like, you know, like...
at least they called it something different.
Yeah, you know? Other than it's got really fast action and everybody shoots. But it's directed by the guy who did, you know, The Warriors and several other, like, movies like that.
Oh, God, The Warriors.
Yeah, right?
You know that's going to get a remake at some point.
Yeah, at some point. But Last Man Standing is definitely one of those forgettable ones, but it is stylish, you know? Like, it's a stylish, fun time, and if you already were like, hey, Fistful of Dollars is the same thing as Yo Jimbo, you'll be like, Last Man Standing is the same thing as those other two. So you're just like, man. But it's about the tension they build in both of them, and that's what's really effective about both those movies. Yeah. And that's what's great about the remake, is that, you know, they both work, you know?
Yeah, definitely. So the next one up is Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Ooh. Now, are you a fan of the original or the remake? Which one are you?
I'm more of a fan of the 70s one, the remake.
Yeah. The 70s one is pretty...
They're both really good movies, but I love the Donald Sutherland one because it's so much bleaker.
Yeah, it's just like, it's over. Like, you're like, what the fuck? So you have the original Body Snatchers, you have the 70s Body Snatchers, and then you have... is it 2000s with Nicole Kidman with Body Snatchers?
Something like that. It was like direct to TV or something like that.
No,
there's been a few.
One.
I'm pretty sure there's like a TV movie one too. It's been remade.
Yeah, it's been made a few times. It's one of those things that it's just kept. They kept that thinking they can keep doing it. Yeah, Nicole Kidman and Daniel Craig, The Invasion. That's what it's called. I was like, it's not exactly Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I was like, what's it called? It's The Invasion, and it's a pretty good one. They try to keep up the scary gore of it, you know, that the Sutherland one has. The Southern one has some great practical effects, you know.
Yeah, that's the thing.
It's like it's so it's just
and that like the ending of the Donald Sutherland one will chill you to the bone because it's just so bleak. If they're just like, nope, you lose.
The Invasion ends in such a hopeful message, you know, like they kind of like win, like the original story, you know,
the
like
original one, yeah.
They win, they get it back, you know, it's over. They're like, hey, we did it, you know, kind of like the original War of the Worlds, where they're like, and then we fucking kicked those aliens' asses,
and then it's just like, no, we got lucky.
yeah, exactly. And you're like, wait, hold on.
That's actually one I didn't list was War of the Worlds.
Yeah, War of the Worlds. Yeah, dude. Guess we could include that in here, but
we might as well just talk about it now.
So, another one that's got multiple remakes. So War of the Worlds original, you have the radio play, Orson Welles original, and then you have the original movie War of the Worlds, and then you have
the Steven Spielberg
one, and I think there's another one, but I could be forgetting it.
I think BBC was doing an adaptation of it. I don't know if it was like a straight to TV movie or if it was like a series adaptation, but I think that's the last time I heard about an adaptation for it.
There's a Fox adaptation that started in 2019, and a BBC one. So they both have it. So you have the 1953 War of the Worlds, you have the 2005, and then you have the Orson Welles. If we're talking completed stories,
just multiple adaptations of the same H.G. Wells
of the same
book.
one. I am not a big fan of the Steven Spielberg one. I understand the feeling it invokes in people because it happened after 9/11. It feels very like what happens in an alien invasion now that we know what happens in a terrorist attack in our own land, sort of.
Did you see Lindsay Ellis's video about it?
Yeah.
The one that was she was comparing it to Independence Day as two very different eras, pre and post 9/11. Great video. Pretty much summed up how I felt about the Spielberg one, where it's just it had a lot of good ideas and some great set pieces, but something about it always felt disconnected, like it didn't know what it wanted to be.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of my problem with it, is that it just doesn't know what it's like Steven Spielberg wants it to be his next Encounters of the Third Kind, but he doesn't know how to be subtle like that anymore. I love Steven Spielberg, but he doesn't know how to be subtle like he is in Third Kind, and the original is just fun. The effects are fun, of course it's schlocky now, but it's one of those things that the original 1953 one, you're like, oh,
Which is weird because making that film much better would have made it kind of an iconic remake, I think, if it was a much better movie, because the tripods have such a menace to them, and they're so well executed. But then the film just kind of falls flat on its face in so many other areas.
Yeah, and you're just like, ooh, nope, no cigar there.
It's just one of those things you're like, oh, you were close.
You were close. Oh, you were so close.
Oh, you could be quicker than that.
And no cigar.
Yeah.
Moving on.
It.
Now, okay, so literally just yesterday, I watched It. I did an It marathon. I watched It Chapter 1 and 2.
Is 2 movies a marathon?
Yeah, well, if it's 5 hours, it's over 5 hours, I would call it a marathon.
Coward, you should have watched the miniseries and the 2 movies. Then that would have been a marathon.
Okay, yeah, that's something like 10 hours. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And that is the important thing to point out here, is that with the remake, with Chapter 2 being 2 hours and 50 minutes, it's longer than the entirety of the TV miniseries, the original.
Which we do have to clarify is a miniseries. The only reason people think of it as a movie is because it kind of aired on TV a lot of the time, it was just one long movie. And it was always presented as one long movie went on home media.
On home media, yeah. If you went to Blockbuster and you found it was one thing, and it was Tim Curry. Same thing with Salem's Lot. It's is that it was a TV special, but it was actually
advertised like a movie.
Yeah. Which, if you're talking Salem's Lot, they did a great job. I can't wait till they remake Salem's fucking Lot.
Here's the thing about the It miniseries, since we should talk about it first. It doesn't hold up.
No.
Really
I rewatched it last year, and it does not hold up.
It's good when you're a kid and you don't know any better.
Yeah, it's scary.
I think it's easy horror for when you're a kid, because I know so many people who grew up oh man, the movie terrified me. It made me afraid of clowns, stuff like that.
And then
you watch it now, you're just this is ridiculous.
How could it be scary?
Tim Curry is holding this thing up.
Literally hurting his back, because he's holding this whole entire movie on his back. And that's really it, is that Tim Curry is frightening in that role, and he does such a good job, and he's the real shining star of that entire thing, and the reason why anybody even thinks of that.
Yeah, were it not for him, I don't think people would really remember it all that much, aside from it having a really cool premise.
Yeah, exactly. I think they would have been the book's better, and walked away, but with Tim Curry doing it, you're oh, that's a little bit iconic there, And that's what's interesting when they go to do this remake is they have to contend with competing against Tim Curry, but in reality, they're competing against a really shitty movie, you know? Like,
Yeah,
you know, like...
it was good to just kind of do their own thing. And to be honest, like, they're very different performances, but Bill Skarsgård, like, really just brought his own.
He brings
He really
everything.
just brought it.
He brings
and
it.
he made the character his own.
Talking about also carrying the movie on his back. He is so fucking
And like his
good.
version of it, I think will tend to stick with people longer than the Curry version.
I think so too. And strictly because of merchandising at this point, you know, like it's gone everywhere. Bill Skarsgård is one of the as you watch the role, you're like this is gonna go down in horror movie history as one of the great like villain roles. Like as you're watching it, even in chapter 2, where you're kind of like, meh, this isn't as scary. He's like this isn't as like it's not hitting as hard as one hits.
Yeah.
He's still killing it, you know. It's kind of like Robert Englund with the Nightmare on Elm Street. You're like, he's still doing a great job, you know. But in the sequels, you know, like, but you know,
for me, like the main problem with we were talking about this on the ride over here of just like the problem is it acts like it wants you to be nostalgic for the first film, even though the first film only came out like 2 years before the second one did.
You know, like, wait, what?
Just like, remember this? Remember this? That, and it relies too much on just like gags and comedy and way too much CG.
Yeah, and the
CG tended to be pretty selective in the first one, and they knew how to utilize it. It seemed like they really relied on it in the second one.
They kind of crank it up a lot more. So there's two things that you automatically get from viewing them back to back, I realize, because doing my marathon, I'll call it a marathon, is that the first one tries to, he physically tries to scare you. He does it himself where he sends a thing and he's right there. In 2, he does not show himself, to the gang. It's most of the time him sending something like the fortune cookies that flip into different animals and stuff like that. It's like it's him sending out a creature to attack instead of him doing it himself.
Which, to be fair, is more like the book where he tended to take on a bunch of different forms. The only reason we started to lean more into the clown was because the miniseries had done it, because they didn't really have the budget to do all this transformation stuff, and they needed more of a central figure as their villain, and that's something that got carried over into the remake.
So, one, I just want to get out of the way. Chapter 1 is one of my favorite horror movies.
It's really good.
I've seen it so many times.
I like it.
We saw it 4 times in theaters. My wife loved it. We went back. Literally, we saw it one time, and then we saw it the next day again. We went back and saw it again.
I like it a lot. It has like a great level of polish. The performances are fantastic. My only beef with it is that it just tends to fall into the same trap that other modern horror films do, where it relies a lot on cheap scares, and I'm not about that because I don't fall for that shit.
But then you have to, if we're talking about cheap scares, chapter 2 is full of them.
Yeah.
And that's really the problem, is that 2, it tries to be epic, tries to be kind of a big conclusion to a story, and in reality, it shoots its own foot by being like, yeah, but do you remember that first movie? But also we got to wrap up that first movie.
If the idea was to split them up into 2 movies, one where they're kids and one with the adults, what's the point of splitting them up if you're just going to spend a good chunk of the film doing flashbacks when they're kids anyway?
Exactly. And
I sort of expected this for a problem that they were going to run into, because the adult section of the book was never the most interesting part.
No, it's not. It's always
the kids section was always the more interesting one.
And it really comes down to a problem with the story, is that the story is about a child killing clown, and then adults come back to kill a child killing clown. You kind of go, the adult should be able to handle this, you know? Like, and that really takes the whole scare away, is that you go from... it really is like an alien isolation situation where, like, you can't do anything to the alien, so you cannot... you're scared because you cannot do anything about it. in chapter 2 of It, you kind of feel like these guys should be able to just choke Pennywise out or something.
Yeah,
you
and
know, like
it's almost like they try to compensate for that by like really leaning into like the gags and the comedy, but it just, you get like this weird disconnect because of it.
And then you have at the end something that could have been really cool. You could have had Pennywise changing into a bunch of different characters, different things, fucking with them. Mm-hmm. And instead you just have giant Pennywise crab for maybe a half an hour. Like, I'm talking,
I mean,
like, so long. Like,
I mean, if we're comparing the two, it's at least better than the miniseries. That was one of the big things I was kind of worried about. I'm like, okay, what are we going to do about this spider?
Yeah.
The big, not the elephant in the room, the giant spider.
The giant spider.
Because in the book, it's more like this eldritch sort of like creature that it's hard to describe, but if they had to describe it like something, it's kind of spider-like.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, well, that's really esoteric and doesn't really translate literally to a film.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do? It's just like, okay, so he's like a giant spider centaur. I'm like, I mean, it's better than a plastic.
Yeah.
It's better than the stop motion garbage in the miniseries.
It's true. It's just that it's just not scary at the end of chapter 2, you know? Like, and that's the thing is 1 feels like a scary movie. 2 feels like they should have handled this shit, you know? Like, and that's the real problem is that other than there's 2 main problems is that she should be able to handle it, and 2, you go from being like a movie that's trying to adapt the book to chapter 2 is strictly it feels like an adaptation of the book. You know, like it feels very tied to the book.
But this is going to be the problem from the start as soon as they split it, and I had said it from the beginning. I'm like, it's making chapter 1 about the kids and then chapter 2 mostly about the adults. I had said from the start, just like, okay, it's going to make for a really good first movie if done well. They're going to trip when they get to the second one.
Yeah, because they tried, and you could tell because they were like, oh, maybe we should include the kids stuff in here and to make it more scary. And then you just end up being like, well, is this actually happening for the kids, or is this a hallucination for the adults? Like you
almost feel like this maybe actually could have been one movie after all.
Yeah,
because all the adult stuff really could have just been summed up in the third act as its own climax.
So,
and you could have had like maybe pieces edited together, not unlike the way the book or the miniseries jumps back and forth. You would just have to be really careful about how you do it.
Yeah, it's true. I just feel like it would have been really long, but I don't disagree with splitting it into 2 movies. I just disagree with constantly
the problem is
bringing
how
it
they
back.
actually use their time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Is that they basically have 3 hours and they spend most of it in the past.
Yeah, fucking around.
Yeah, and you're like, okay. Even though it is a fast 3 hours, I will give it that. Chapter 2 is a really fast 3 hours. But remake-wise, it is the first chapter 1 is a great remake, and you're like really excited by it, and then chapter 2 lets you down real hard. It's basically the best way I can describe it, is it just lets you down.
It lets you down. So, what doesn't let me down is the remake of The Fly.
Yes, because this is, when we're talking remakes, this is some of the top shit right here, is The Fly. The Fly is... the original is a fun B movie. It's a great B movie.
Vincent Price, what's not to like?
And then the Jeff Goldblum's 1980s The Fly is
the David Cronenberg one.
Is the height of the gore practical effects.
Oh yeah,
it's
all just pure, delicious, disgusting body horror.
It is crazy. It's a horrific, and it's some people. I've watched this movie with a lot of people, and some people just can't watch it. You know, like it just gets really you're just like it gets really gross, and you're kind of like, damn. You know?
I think like the big turning point, whether you're out of it or not, is really going to be probably the scene where he tries to teleport the monkey. Yeah. And it just like turns to jelly
you're
on
like,
the inside. And they do like this really effective practical effect where it's still alive and it's like twitching and stuff. And you're like, oh, I'm out. You're either in or you're out at that point.
Exactly. And I feel like Jeff Goldblum is Jeff Goldbluming as much as he possibly can in that movie, and it's so good if you're a fan of him, you know. Otherwise, you're just like, oh my god, like you're like, if you're not a fan of him, you're kind of sitting there being like, did people find this sexy before? Because they're acting like he's sexy, you know, like, and then you're because they do, they're like, oh man, look at this Jeff Goldblum fucking character, he's hot as fuck, and like,
I know a lot of people who had like a thing for Jeff Goldblum. It's kind of interesting.
It's interesting because you're kind. For me, it's always been like, look at that goofy Jeff Goldblum.
Look at goofy Jeff Goldblum, but like, I don't know. I
it's
can't
the chin.
explain
I
it.
assume it's the chin.
I can't explain it.
And I really do. I think that movie's one of those great 80s horror flicks, and the practical effects will make that movie a classic
the direction,
forever.
the practical effects, the performances are great. Even the score is good. It was Howard Shore.
Yeah. It's a fantastic movie. It's one of those ones that when you're talking about great remakes, it has to be on the list.
Fun fact, I had actually seen the sequel first because it was on TV once when I was
Fly
a kid.
2.
Yeah. The Fly 2 is not great. It's okay.
I've never seen it.
It's okay.
I was like, no.
It was directed by Chris Wallace, who had done the effects for the first movie.
Oh, okay.
So for what it is, it's okay. It's got some like good effects, but it definitely falls way more into schlock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's gonna happen. You gotta ride that balance of schlock or actual horror. And,
Yeah, absolutely.
and they did it there, the first one.
So the next one up is going to be like 2 more horrors, and I swear we're going to mix it up a bit. It's just the way it fell. Is Let Me In.
Let Me In. So this is one of your favorite movies of all time.
Yeah, Let the Right One In, the Swedish film, is one of my favorite movies. Let Me In is the American remake that Matt Reeves had done. Mm-hmm. And I love the original film. Like, I love how twisted and yet oddly like romantic it is.
Yeah.
It's beautifully shot. But the remake, for what it is decent. Like, it's a solid flick, but it has, like, none of the same poetry or ambiguity that the original film does, and that's my major problem with
I've
it.
only ever seen the original, and I love it. You've shown it to me. It's great. Like you said, it's strangely beautiful. It's one of those, like, slightly fantasy ones where you're just, like, you feel like you're in a fairy tale almost.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Like, you're like, what the fuck? And so I just don't see how... Like any American remake, like Old Boy, which I don't know if Old Boy was on
Old
this
Boy's
list.
not in here because I think I just repressed it.
Yeah, you're just like, keep that shit down. And if we have to bring up Old Boy, it's real simple. Don't watch the American remake. Don't do it. Just save yourself.
Yeah.
It's an American remake sometimes, like most American things, can lose all its subtlety. Like, it can just like, it's just like, oh, is that subtle? I'm gonna fucking say it out loud. Like,
yeah, that was the entire point. Like, the cool thing about the film is that it's ambiguous as to whether or not Ellie actually really cares about Oscar.
Yeah.
Or whether she's
playing
grooming him to be just like a steward for her, like the old man we saw in the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
You leave that up to your own interpretation. In the film, it leans more towards the idea that he's probably just being groomed, which I don't like having more of a straight answer for that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
You're kind of like, oh no, you shouldn't have let me know.
Because it is based on a book. Even the author of the original book wrote like a short story that confirmed that that's actually not the case. Like, she does care about him.
Yeah.
And I disagree with that too. I'm just like, just leave it ambiguous. Don't give a straight answer. Like, your imagination is going to give you a more interesting answer.
Exactly, than anything anybody could have written
It's
down.
not something you should confirm.
Exactly. But moving... we said remake. I brought up Old Boy. Might as well say it. And it really is just... Old Boy's a great movie. If you're going to watch a great action flick, watch the original Old Boy. If you want to watch trash, if you want to waste your goddamn time, watch the American remake. And I like, is it Spike Lee?
Yeah, Spike Lee did it.
And you're like, I love Spike Lee. Pretty much everything Spike Lee does, I'm like, great, cool, awesome.
I love Spike Lee. I love Spike Lee when he's good. He's not always good. When he...
Well, no, I don't think he's... When he's not good, I think he gets long in the tooth. I think he's always good.
Yeah.
I think sometimes he's just like, I got a lot of shit to say, and then he gets long in the tooth.
When Spike Lee like nails it, he really, really nails it, and then when he trips, he really trips.
And this Old Boy is definitely the biggest trip. One of his biggest trips he does. I love the original Old Boy. It's definitely one of those you will see its influence in most action flicks nowadays. You'll be like, wait, didn't they do that scene in Daredevil? And you'll be like, no, they stole it from Old Boy. Like, and you'll see that forever, you know, like, is that people will steal these action scenes because they're so iconic and great. And the first one just has one of the greatest fucking twists I've ever seen in my goddamn life.
It's so fucked up.
It's so fucked
It'll
up.
stick with you forever.
And that's the reason why the remake doesn't work, is they try to change up the twist, and that don't work.
Yeah.
That don't work.
It
No,
just makes it worse.
No, it just
even like the attempt to like recreate like the one shot like fight was so much worse and missed the entire point.
You're like, great, yeah, fucked it up.
Yeah.
Thanks, I hate it.
So next up is one I'm a big fan of, is Little Shop of Horrors.
Oh, so I am not as big of a fan of Little Shop of Horrors as you obviously are, because I've seen the original, and it just never really, I don't know. I never even like thought about it twice.
It is one of like more of those cult films. Like, if there was one thing to get me in the music, it's just like, because as a kid, I was never against musicals, but aside from like Disney ones, it would sort of take like some pulling to be like, I'm going to sit down and watch a musical now. But I was never like too opposed. But it was sort of an easy in, just like, what about a musical that's fucked up and it's about a plant that eats people? You son of a bitch,
Yeah,
I'm in. And I've seen the original Corman film. It's dumb. It's bad. It's really stupid. It's funny for what it is.
Yes.
But but it's one of those things where they just took the basic idea. They're just like, what if we took just the idea? Because the idea is nice. The premise is good. The way it's executed is the problem.
Yes.
So just keep the premise and just kind of change everything else.
Yeah. I'm definitely down for their making it again this next year. I'm pretty sure there's another Nightmare. There's another.
Yeah,
Little
they're
Shop of Horrors.
producing it. They can give me a CGI Audrey 2. They can kiss my ass. Look, and there also is a caveat with Little Shop of Horrors, because there's the director's ending and then there's the theatrical ending where the theatrical ending has a forced, like, Studio Notes happy ending because they're a bunch of babies, even though the entire point of the music is that it's a tragic tale.
Yeah.
Where a man basically sells his soul and then is punished for it. That's the point. But no, we gotta give a happy ending. But then years later, when it actually got remastered for the anniversary and put on Blu-ray, they completely restored the original ending and added to it. So now you can just watch the director's cut of it, which is great.
Cool.
And it's better.
All right. I'll be down for that. I'll watch that. What's up? What's next?
I'll bring it over at some point. The next one is, this will probably fall into like us repeating ourselves with Yojimbo, but it's the Magnificent Seven.
Yes.
Yeah. Because it's a similar case. Samurai film adapted into Western.
Yes, very similar. You have the original, the Seven Samurai, and then you have the Magnificent Seven, which is a classic Western. Yeah. And then you have so many other remakes on remakes of the same
If we're talking
concept.
specifically like Magnificent Seven, ones that actually keep the name Magnificent Seven, we've gotten maybe 3 or 4 different films for it.
It's true. It's kind of funny because it like, you know, you don't get a ton of remakes of Seven Samurai, but you get a ton of remakes of Magnificent Seven, which you're kind of like, okay, you're like, all right, it's the same fucking thing, but all right. And that's really it, is that Seven Samurai, I actually really enjoy Seven Samurai a lot, because it feels... you actually feel like these 7 samurai fight off this entire army. You know, like the problem is with this plot is watching it now, you've seen it a billion times. So many shows. Literally, The Mandalorian this past year did 7 samurai. They taught the whole village, and then they were able to fight back against the invaders. It's literally 7 samurai.
Yeah, the thing about the original film was that like it was sort of an unprecedented sense of like scale.
Yes, exactly. And it feels real, you know, like these guys, it's like, you know, they're really long shots they do sometimes, and it feels like they actually repel these dudes, you know, like, and I feel like that's what really works about the film is that it feels urgent. I love the rain they do at the end for the fight scene for the originals. And it's so fucking great. And then it works. It just works so well. And the Magnificent Seven is very good. I'm not going to say it's not, but it does not stick in my mind the way Seven Samurai does.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's funny that that Magnificent Seven is the one that gets remade all the time.
Maybe we're just better off that way.
Yeah.
You imagine how mad we'd be if there's just like Seven Samurai remake.
Yeah, it's true. I'm sure there is. I'm sure we're missing one. I'm sure there's a remake
Inevitable.
of it. Yeah. But it's pretty much, they basically copy each other, except they're like, but now there's guns.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's pretty much it. Like, you're like, all right.
All right, it's time to get mad.
Sound give it.
Planet of the Apes.
Oh, God. So, okay, fuck. So there's so many. We're going to talk about the three remakes of the three main remakes of Planet of the Apes. We have the original Planet of the Apes.
Well, the thing is, the Rise of the Planet of the Apes is a reboot, not a remake.
True. Yes, that's true. It is. It's more of a reboot. So you have the original, and then you have Tim Burton's remake, where he basically thinks he can do it again. Like basically the same plot again, and except it's like he never even saw the other movie. He just heard there was a movie about a planet taken over by apes.
Yeah, it's taking the superficial idea of Planet of the Apes rather than what made Planet of the Apes great and trying to make a new version of it that way.
So there's tons of things wrong with the Tim Burton one. There's so many things, but I want to say what's right about the original.
Yeah,
the original is a great sci-fi film.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things that it feels like a really long Twilight Zone episode.
And Rod Serling wrote it.
Yeah, Rod Serling wrote it, so it feels like that's the reason why it feels like that.
It's basically like a big feature-length episode of The Twilight Zone.
The actors are fantastic, and there's just no other ending like that ending.
Yeah.
Like it just hits so well even now.
Aside from like the original film, have you seen any of like the continuing series from like that or original?
Oh yeah.
I'm big.
Not all of them, but most of them.
I'm big fans of like that original Planet of the Apes series, except for the last one. Battle for the Planet of the Apes is
you're just
but
like no way.
Escape, like Beneath, Escape, and Conquest are all really good.
They're fun,
and that's what Rise of the Planet of the Apes really took inspiration from, was specifically Conquest.
Yeah.
To be like, okay, what if we rebooted it and leaned more towards this to make it like a new version of that same origin?
Yeah.
And plus, I just love the idea of the original Planet of the Apes movies being this like cyclical cycle of tragedy.
Yeah.
Where because of the time travel shenanigans, like it's just a cycle of suffering that continues over and over again.
You're like, oh shit, that died. But okay, so let's go into what's wrong about the Tim Burton one, because there's a lot. First, you got Michael Jackson monkey. Bad. Like, and if you've seen the movie, you know what we're talking about. There's a specific monkey that they were like, hey, it's a lady monkey, and instead it looks like Michael fucking Jackson.
Yeah, and aside from that, like the makeup is really, really, really good.
It is true. A lot of the monkeys throughout the movie look really solid.
Yeah.
So when this one monkey comes out, you're kind of like, what the fuck? And then there's one other monkey that you're kind of like.
And I don't even necessarily think that would be a problem, because, an ape is an ape.
Yeah.
But it's the fact that they try to make her like kind of like the love interest monkey, and you're just like,
You're like, wait, no.
But that's really all it has, is like a decent cast, really good makeup, and that's about it.
But that's it, because if we're talking this is a Tim Burton movie, where's the Tim Burton in this movie? If we're talking the Tim Burton dial, the dial's below 0. There's none of his style here. It's like somebody was like, no, Tim Burton, no. The entire
it feels
time
like
he was making the movie.
It just feels like bad studio fare that anyone would have
Anybody
made.
could have
Yeah.
made. Like, if you told me Tim Burton did it and I didn't know, I would say no. You lied to me, because it doesn't, none of what makes a Tim Burton movie is present here.
Yeah.
Other than they have the ship that lands, and that sort of looks Tim Burton-y. You can tell he maybe drew the fucking storyboard of it or something, and that's why it looks like that. Other than that, though, the aesthetic's not there at all.
Yeah.
Like, and I can see a subdued Tim Burton's aesthetic working, but this is like no style,
No.
at all. Like,
And then it also falls flat on its face, not only because good old Marky Mark,
Ugh.
who I'll just say, like Mark Wahlberg can be entertaining given the right circumstances. But I would honestly say 9 times out of 10 he's not that great an actor.
No, I most of the time I'm not excited to see a Marky Mark film other than getting to say Marky Mark.
And this was like when he first started acting, so it's all just like open mouth bad.
Yeah, he's just like, wah.
Yeah. And then even then there's the big twist at the ending, which tries to sort of like, it doesn't want to do the same twist, but it also wants to have a big twist, but it also wants to have the same reverence. They're just like, what if we took another monument and made the twist that?
Yeah, and you're like,
what do we got?
Wait.
Washington, let's do the Lincoln Memorial.
Ugh. It's a frustrating movie.
And it's one of those things where like the twist doesn't make sense.
No.
But then the idea was like, it's not supposed to make sense, and you were supposed to find out like what actually happened in a sequel that never happened.
Yeah.
So you're just like, that's cute.
Yeah, you're like, no, that was not going to happen.
Whereas like the twist in the original made everything make so much more sense.
Exactly. That's the thing, is it's a twist that works with the plot instead of a twist that just happens.
And the greatest thing about the Planet of the Apes film is like, it's one of those things that movie would have only been made in the 60s.
Yeah.
It really only would have been made in the 60s.
Yes. But and I love that movie.
Yeah.
It's one of those ones that if I'm listing like sci-fi movies, it's always up there.
And the way the Tim Burton film turned out was the reason I was skeptical about Rise of the Planet of the Apes when that was first being advertised. I had kind of wanted nothing to do with it. My mom kind of dragged me to see it, and then I came out of it just like, oh wow, that was good.
That was a good time.
That was good. And then the 2 sequels were both better.
Yeah, they were fantastic. I would say those 2 sequels make some of the best.
The Apes reboot trilogy is my idea of a perfect trilogy where every single movie is better than the other. Because even some of the greatest trilogies, like Lord of the Rings, for me, don't have that.
Yeah, they don't get better and better and better.
Yeah, I love Return of the King, but I prefer Fellowship to Two Towers.
Oh, shit.
But for my idea, it's just like 2's better than 1, and then 3's better than both. Which never happens.
No, not often.
But with the Apes movies, like, I prefer Dawn to Rise, and I prefer War above both of them.
Yeah, because it's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's just, those 2 movies are so great. Like, I know all 3 as a trilogy are great, but the Rise is okay in my eyes. Like, it's good. It's good.
Rise is a solid. It's
solid.
More like blockbuster fare.
Yeah,
like it's a solid, like fun, like summer film.
And
then like War and Dawn are just like, no, it's time to get deep.
Yeah, and you're like, what the fuck?
Which is good because War is the only one of like the reboot trilogy that feels like it's on par with like those first 3 original films of like that same reverence and just like, no, it's time to get into some allegories.
Yeah, right. They're like, here, you're gonna learn something today.
Yeah.
So, moving on.
Moving on. We already talked about Psycho, so yoink.
Yoink.
RoboCop. This one's an interesting one because it's trying to be like a remake and a reboot at the same time.
Yes, it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Is that so? We have the original, which is a classic.
Oh, yeah.
It was a classic from the beginning. It was a big blockbuster hit, and it has continued being a cult classic since, and then you have this one coming out, and it thought that maybe it could capitalize on that. And
well, mistake number 1, making it PG-13.
Yes. Absolutely.
You
have a hard R film.
Yeah, the entire pull of RoboCop was that it was sort of dressed up as like this traditional, like, I am RoboCop, I'm going to save the day. And then it turns into like this bout of complete ultra-violence and a lot of cocaine. And you're just like, well, this is way better than what I expected. So the fact that you decided to sand off the edges and just keep like the idea of just like a RoboCop thing, just that exact premise, and then just trying to turn into like this superhero type thing, it's just like that misses the entire point.
Yeah, you basically come from a dark comic book, which is RoboCop is a comic book. In like the original comic book is a great subversion of like what would happen if we actually had a cop who was this super powerful.
The film did come first.
Really?
It did, yeah.
I thought it was comic first.
It was not a comic first. Movie first, and then it started to become big in the comics because Frank Miller wrote a lot of the comics, and then Frank Miller ended up writing RoboCop 2. And it shows because it's like Frank Miller not at his best. It's like got a lot of weird, like some of the Frank Millerisms in there. It's all over that movie. 2 is the one that like leans a little too far to like it's kind of mean spirited. It's a little much. It's the one that kind of crosses the line for me.
Interesting.
And then RoboCop 3 was just like, just forgettable trash. They try to make it PG. And
Yeah.
done.
Yeah, you're like, nah, no thank you. And yeah, the RoboCop remake, it's exactly as you say. It's when you take away this dark twist of what if you give a man this power, and you just go, what if you give a man this power? That's it. You're kind of like, okay. You know, like, you're like, so he's another super-powered super soldier. What else? You know, like...
Yeah, it takes away everything that was unique about the premise to begin with.
Yeah, and you basically just, like, you're basically hoping that the name recognition and your cool CGI will get you through, and then I don't mind the movie. I really don't. When I saw it, I remember thinking... okay, you know, like, I remember just thinking, like, that was a fun action film, but not much else. And that's really it, is that you go from a great, stylish cult classic to blockbuster fare, and that's it, you know, like...
But, I mean, we're in the age of, like, soft reboots now, so they are trying to get another one off the ground. The idea is that they want to go with the premise that was planned for the original version of 2 before Frank Miller came on.
Yeah.
And, which was sort of like RoboCop kind of gets sent further into the future.
Oh.
And so it's all about, like, society has shifted, and they're still trying to get it off the ground. I know the idea is that they would like to get Peter Weller back for it if he's willing. Cool. And I'm just like, well, if you do it and you do it right, I'm down for it because I think there's more stuff to mine.
Yeah, obviously there is. You know, like, I feel like there's so much more to go on.
I get so tired of movies that present such a great foundation and it opens the doors for such brilliant ideas, and then all the sequels just, like, never do any of those.
Yeah,
ideas.
And you're like, wait, what? Why?
It happens so often. You're just like, what the hard work is done. The origin's out of the way. Now we can really experiment.
Yep, you could say that about most of the Jurassic Park movies, is that the Jurassic Park one opens the door, and then all 4 of the other ones are like, we have dinosaurs. And you're like, yeah, but do you have anything else? And they're like, yeah, but we got dinosaurs.
The Fallen Kingdom was like, well, we got a human clone girl.
We cloned real people this time.
God, Fallen Kingdom. Jurassic House.
Jurassic House. But that's not a remake, Deshaun. We're
not.
digressing.
I just wanted to make fun of Fallen Kingdom because it deserves it. But next up is Scarface.
So, Scarface, the original, is a gangster classic.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's one of those ones that they show you at film school because it's one of the ones that comes up with a lot of the cinematography and lighting techniques that we still use today. It is still one of the main things I always remember is, and it's something that's used often now in so many things. There was this light bar that you see this light shining through in a shot, and the Scarface guy moves into the light, and something about that is so effective, and then you've seen it so many times in so many other movies. It's one of those things that if you love film history, you'll love the original Scarface, because it's a classic gangster film, and then they spice it up with some really cool old cinematography, and you're like, ah, cool. And then you have a movie that divides me and you, because I'm a big fan of Al Pacino's Scarface.
I don't hate the Al Pacino Scarface, but I'm really not all that crazy about it.
Yeah, you don't like it.
I like Brian De Palma as a filmmaker. I don't think it's one of his best movies. It's just kind of... I just find it kind of silly.
I mean, yes, it is.
Like,
silly.
it's so fucking 80s, and I think almost to its detriment. Like, I love Al Pacino, but he is hamming it the hell up.
See, I'm such a sucker for the 80s, and that's the reason why I love that.
It's very much a product of its time, but it just doesn't impress on me the same way that, like, other gangster films do. Yeah. And you're also, like, a much bigger fan of that particular genre.
Yes, I'm a huge gangster film
but
guy.
I remember almost getting into an argument with someone for it at work. Yeah. Because I told him I wasn't really crazy about it. And he's just like, dude, how could you not? That's, like, the greatest gangster film. I'm like, Goodfellas, The Godfather... literally anything else. It's just like, it's kind of on the lower end, honestly.
Yeah. And I'm not going to argue with you there. It is a good gangster film, but when you don't say it's the greatest gangster film. It's up there. It's definitely on the shelf with a couple other ones, but it doesn't. It's not going to be Goodfellas or Godfather for me. You know, like Like it might sit right next to The Irishman, maybe, but as being like an epic gangster film.
Yeah.
But that's sad. But I feel like Al Pacino, I feel like you got to give it to him here. He really sends it the entire time. If there's any other movie he sends it, it's this movie.
I'll tell you what, he doesn't phone it in. Mm-mm. That was like the first hint of him like, oh man, I can be really loud.
Yes.
And then we were talking about it with Eddie on the one episode that are just like, and then after Scent of a Woman, it all just
it just all goes to hell.
Hoo-ha!
Hoo-ha! Hoo-ha! I fucking love Al Pacino. But yes, this movie can either be to anybody a schlocky mess or a great movie.
Or it's both.
Yeah.
So we only have a couple ones left. We got The Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing.
So, I love The Thing. I love The Thing. It's when I'm naming top 10 movies, favorite movies of all time, The Thing is in there, and it's closer to the top.
Here's the thing.
It's always there.
The more I rewatch The Thing, the more I think it might be my favorite horror film.
Yeah.
But my favorite film is also Silence of the Lambs. So that kind of comes into play as to whether or not you consider Silence of the Lambs more of a horror film or a thriller. I think it leans more towards thriller, but I'm not going to argue that it's not kind of both.
Yeah.
But if we're talking more straight horror, I would lean more towards The Thing. It's a film that
and that's the thing it is straight horror, and that's why I love it. It's not just it's scary, it jumps at you. It's like it creates this atmosphere of you can't trust anybody, you can't trust they're stuck, and they're not going anywhere, and the monster could be anything or anyone or anywhere.
Man, a movie where no one can trust anyone because they're afraid of some invisible menace, and it was made in the 80s. I wonder what that could have been.
I wonder what that could have been about. But it's a movie that is so effective in its atmosphere, and then also is effective in its imagery. Like the minutes the dogs got ripped apart or the head falls off, you are screaming, like it has multiple types of scares, and that's why I feel like it is the king of horror films. Because
it like has such a
chiller,
great sense
it's a thriller,
it has such a great sense of suspense. And then it doesn't even mess up the payoff when you do actually see the alien at certain points, because the effects are fantastic. And then even on top of that, one of the things I love about the film is that there's no stupid characters in it.
No, it's not like
even when people make stupid mistakes, it feels completely logical given the tension of that situation and everyone just kind of losing their mind.
It's crazy, and it's so well done. I love this movie, and it's so interesting because the original is not like this. The original is strictly a B horror movie. The alien comes down, he's a big alien, big furry alien guy, and they have to fight him off with fire.
The John Carpenter film, and Carpenter is a big fan of that original movie. It's still one of his favorite movies.
It is good.
It's referenced in Halloween. It's the movie they're watching at the house. So he was initially hesitant about doing it because in his mind it was a great movie that didn't need to be touched. Yeah. But he was convinced, it's just like, well, if you add your own flavor to it and make it a little more like the original short story that the first movie was based on, where it wasn't like some sort of like Frankenstein's monster-type creature, it was something unseen that could transform.
Yes, exactly. And that's what's so effective about it. Now this one has a remake on top of this.
Sort of, because it's a remake, but it's actually a prequel.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're talking to Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
Yeah, Winstead.
I think it's 2011. This remake. Yeah.
The Mary Elizabeth Winstead is actually about the Norwegian outpost that they said that they come upon and discover in the John Carpenter film.
Interesting.
And it leads up to how that film started. The film literally ends with the helicopter chasing the dog.
Really?
Like on their way to the outpost that we see in the Carpenter film.
Interesting.
So it actually is a prequel, which to be honest, wouldn't have been a bad idea.
No, it's not a bad idea.
Because you would get sort of more of the same, but then you would actually see what happened to that Norwegian, what happened to like the Norwegians.
Yeah, exactly. But then I have only seen a little bit of it because I did not want to finish it because I was not impressed.
You know what the saddest thing about the film is? is that they initially did make practical effects for the Thing in that movie.
No way.
And it was painted over with CG because of studio notes.
That's fucked up.
Like, they actually went out of their way to try and make, like, believable practical effects, and the studio's just like, no, it looks too old. We don't do that anymore. CG.
Wow, fuck them. Fuck them.
It's just like, what? Because that's kind of the biggest problem, is that the John Carpenter's version of the Thing is so subtle.
Yeah.
And knows exactly how to, like, build up and make you tense, and knows exactly when to actually come out with a good scare.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, and the Thing actually reasonably, like a creature that wants to survive, knows how to hide itself.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, in the remake, you see it every 5 minutes, and it's just like this big CG mess, and it kind of loses the same integrity.
Yeah. It's just kind of like, oh, why am I looking at
Well,
it?
it's there.
Yeah.
I thought you were trying to hide.
It really, it's just kind of one of those ones that it's not exactly a remake, but it makes you go like, oh, this shouldn't have happened. Like, no, you shouldn't have done this. Just let the classic be a classic. And we not, of course, we're not saying every one of these classics should stay a classic, but this is definitely one of them, in my opinion. You know, like this, for me, it feels like you shouldn't remake Sis and Kane. Like, why would you?
And the idea behind the John Carpenter film, and the reason it didn't really speak to people when it first came out, was because it's so bleak.
Yeah, it's just like, hey, you're dead.
Like, we're dead either way. Just like, oh, are one of them the Thing? Just like, well, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because they're both done.
Yeah, you're just like, whoops.
And it didn't really speak to people because the Thing came out around the same time that E.T. and Blade Runner came out, and they both failed because of E.T.
Of course. Damn you,
Not
E.T.
knocking E.T. E.T.'s a solid flick, but like,
damn you,
the
E.T.
fact that it beat Blade Runner and the Thing makes me really sad, and has to make you take things with a grain of salt. That sometimes people have no idea what they're talking about when a movie comes out, and sometimes like longevity is what happens. Age is how you really judge something.
It's true. It's true. It's like if you can come back years later and the movie's still good.
One of the funniest experiences you can ever do is look up old reviews of Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
For like a bunch of different critics who didn't like it, and now we consider it one of the greatest sequels of all time, if not the greatest. And people react to it just like people react to Last Jedi now. It's so funny. It's hilarious.
They're like, they ruined it. They were they don't have no idea how to write things. Like,
yeah, it's ridiculous.
You're like, oh, okay.
But moving on, we got two more.
All right.
True Grit.
True Grit. I'm a big fan of the original. I'm a big fan of John Wayne.
I like the original. I prefer the Coen Brothers one.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And it's not that I don't like the Coen Brothers one. It feels more iconic, you know, like that it's just like John Wayne just feels more, and that's really it. Because otherwise, everything else is great, you know. Like, I'm really not.
The thing I like about the remake is that it actually has some, grit to it.
Some grit.
Like, it feels more like a hard bars, like pull no punches Western, and mostly the idea is the Coen Brothers said they didn't really think of it so much as a remake, rather than trying to just make a more accurate adaptation of the book.
Okay. Yeah, that makes
and
sense.
the book is bleaker than what we got in the John Wayne film, which is why the remake is.
All right.
Which is sort of the idea to go, and kind of why I lean towards it a little more. I like it as sort of more of like a darker sort of coming of age story, where it doesn't really end the way you want it to.
Yeah. All right. I just didn't. I don't know. It was one of those things that the remake didn't strike with me as much as the original did, and it just was. It's like I really do like the Coen Brothers. I really do. I really like.
And it's interesting.
And I like the movie.
It's interesting to see them tackle a project like a remake because they don't seem like the type of filmmakers.
Yeah,
that
to
would.
do that.
Then
but
again, they did the Lady Killer. So
who knows?
That's a weird one. So the last one, I don't know if you've ever seen this. Have you ever seen Willard?
Yes, of course I've seen Willard.
You've seen the original?
Yes, of course
And
I've
the
seen
remake?
Yes, of
Okay.
course.
Good.
Yes, actually, this is one of my favorite.
This is like one of
sections
those-
of remakes. You know, like
Willard is kind of one of those kind of under the radar horror films for me, both the original and the remake.
Yeah, no, it's true. Both of them completely cult classics. Like when you bring up Willard, people are like, "Huh?" Like, and I literally happened at work like a couple before when we had work. I was at work and I was like, "You guys ever seen Willard? You know, the one with the Michael Jackson song?" And they're like, "The what?" And I'm like, "Yeah, the horror movie with the rats."
Yeah.
And they're like, what? And I'm like, oh, you got some fun movies to watch. And that's really it. That's what I say to people, is that these are, if you are not intensely freaked out by rats, which some people are, these are fun movies.
Yeah.
It's like both of them.
Yeah, I like both of them. The remake definitely has a lot more polish than the original does, and I think it makes it more rewatchable in that respect. I do prefer that the ending of the original film is a lot bleaker.
Yes. And that's, I feel like it works that way, but Crispin Glover as Willard in the remake is top notch. He's top notch. Both movies are great chillers. I feel like, yes, the original is scarier.
Yeah, Willard,
it's scarier.
Willard is kind of like fanboy's ultimate thing of just like, if you've ever seen Willard, the Crispin Glover one, you just sit there and just like, why has Crispin Glover not played the Joker yet?
Yeah, right? You're just like, why not? Because it's the same thing.
They're both really good. It was, for a long time, really hard to get your hands on like the original film. Thankfully, Shout Factory, I love Shout Factory so much, actually put it on Blu-ray. They gave it its own remaster, stuff like that. I haven't picked it up yet, but they remastered both it and its sequel that everyone tends to forget about, Ben.
Oh, really? That's funny that they just named the sequel Ben, because that's the name of the Michael Jackson song. It's called Ben.
And Ben is like the evil rat. Socrates was the good one, remember?
Yep, I remember.
Because he originally betrays them, and then bad things happen. It doesn't happen as bad as in the original. They did shoot a bleaker ending for the remake, but they didn't use it.
Oh, really? Yeah, no, I've seen the alternate cuts. I've seen it. I love these movies because I love a good monster flick, and then for the monster to be just rats works so well, in my opinion. You know, like it's just like it's like such an obvious thing, and they do it so well.
Yeah, and it's just they're both such squeamish movies.
Yeah,
because it's something as like domestic and commonplace as rats, which already freak people out. So the fact it's like, and now these rats are eating people. Yeah, and the thing about the original is that I think its low budget tends to work for its advantage because it seems a lot harsher. Yeah. Because there's actually like little animatronic rats just like, or real rats just like crawling around. And you're just like, ugh.
You're just like, Jesus, you're like, jeez. It definitely, it's one of those horror movies that if you haven't seen it and you're a horror movie fan, I absolutely recommend it. Like it's almost a no question. Like I run into more people who have not seen these than seen
Definitely.
them.
I'm glad you've actually seen it. That's why, because I run into so few people who have seen it. I assumed you had it.
No, it was one of those things that my stepfather, Eddie, he's for some reason is a gigantic fan of them because he's a fan of rats. He owns like several. Yeah. And he was just like, oh, you haven't seen this movie? And I watched them when I was younger, and I remember being like, oh, these are pretty good.
It's one that comes up for conversation for like, I wouldn't say underrated.
I would say it's
under
funny
the radar
because
or overlooked
it's
movies.
It's the same vein as Reanimator, I feel like, where the effects are good, it's a mad scientist, and it flies under the radar, but is loved by horror movie fans everywhere, you know, like, even if they are schlocky stuff.
Yeah, and Willard, I would say, is a lot more palatable than Reanimator.
Yeah, Reanimator's like, hey, here's a fucking dick running around.
I have a running thing every October with a friend who, like, kind of grew up, as I say, uncultured and then watched nearly enough movies. We have a thing where we watch a shitload, like 20, maybe 30 movies over the course of October.
Nice.
And I waited a couple years before we decided to do Reanimator because I'm just like, let's prep you first.
Yeah, let's get you there.
Wait till this stuff feels commonplace, then we can do Reanimator so it doesn't seem as weird. Willard, we actually haven't done yet. I'll probably do that
this year. Yeah. Absolutely add it. I like those movies a lot. And Crispin Glover. After that movie, I can watch Crispin Glover in anything. I always could, but that movie sold me on him forever. You know, like, I mean, Back to the Future did, almost, but like this is like.
But that was one that really like showed his range more so than he was good in Back to the Future. It's definitely better than say like Friday the 13th.
Yeah,
which one he was in? He was in 4.
Yes,
yeah, he was in 4. But it was one that like really shows like, wow, this guy does have range and he has sort of an edge to him. It's almost a shame that he's not as in many big projects as you would like.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. But then again, I've also heard he's a little hard to work with.
Yeah, so. I hear he's just always in it, you know, like, and you know, that's great for the role. That's really it. There's actually an interview he gives on Conan. No, not Conan, Letterman show, where he is acting as the character from Willard. And the thing was, Willard wasn't going to come out for another year, but he didn't know that. He was filming Willard at the time, so he just did the character on the show thinking people were going to see this a year later and be like, haha, isn't that cool? He did the character. But in reality, he came off as a crazy man, you know,
Willard was never really
and a really awkward interview. It's really fucking great.
And Willard wasn't as big of a hit for like people to remember it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those things where it comes like if you look up like awkward Crispin Glover interview on YouTube, that's the one that comes up, and it is incredible to watch. Like you're just like, oh,
I haven't seen that. I'll definitely look it up.
It's definitely worth the watch. But
that's it.
That's pretty much it. Guys, if we forgot a remake, please comment down below.
There are so many of these. I just tried to make a list that kind of mixed it up and didn't have necessarily just all the obvious ones.
Exactly. Let us know if we forgot any. Let us know if there was ones that you were like, well, I love this one, and you guys said it sucked, and I love War of the Worlds, and we'll tell you it sucked. No, just kidding. Please follow us on our website, Galaxy of Geek. Please follow our Twitters. It's Mod Kareka and Frank. And please, guys, subscribe, follow, whatever you have to do to please keep listening to the Warp Shelf podcast because we love doing it and we would love to keep doing it for you. So thank you, guys, and have a good one.
See you next time.